Good evening, everybody. A new era begins. A show that I've waited my whole life to do for. Then again, I've waited my whole life to do a book called Lessons from the Microphone. The Motor City Madmouth show is here and in the house. And yes, I am Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth. And I couldn't think of a better person to go ahead and kick this bad boy out than with my longtime colleague, George Eichorn. George, thanks for making history tonight.
Oh,
It's just a matter of time
absolutely.
before we got it going, my brother.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, man. This is great moment for you, great moment for me too. And let's get this right out there in front of everybody because it's going to be a great show and a great scene tonight. Yep.
Like I said, I couldn't think of anybody else to do it with. I have to let people know you wrote the foreword of my book, obviously, Lessons from the Microphone. We'll get to that in a little while. But, I was talking to JB Ellis, and when we talked about me doing the show, he says, Scott, what you got to do is you have to launch the show ahead of when your book comes out. And then when your book comes out, they'll be able to go hand in hand. And as for JB Ellis, well, that was a really good suggestion. That's why we're going out there and bringing it on tonight. The book is due out any day now. It's right now in the review stages with Amazon and Kindle. So we'll keep you more posted on it. I should point out that the Motor City Madmouth show is being broadcast around the world and here on YouTube as well. So as we get the show going, I'll get into what the show's going to be about in a little while. But I want to let everybody know how I got the name. My ex-wife, Susanpetrik, saw me on a show in Phoenix called Weeklywheels. It was hosted by Mark Allen and a guy named Gary Miller. And it was really a neat show. And when she saw how animated that I was, and she called me the Motor City Madmouth because she loved Ted Nugent, the Motor City Madman, then obviously between my hand movement, my animated style, my voice inflections, the name stuck. So Weeklywheels out in Phoenix is really where it got started. And, and Ted Nugent, of course, being the Motor City Madman, I'm wondering as I was going through the trademark process, and I'll get to it in a little while, does anybody trademark this thing? Anybody know? But apparently not. And that's when I do my resiliency with it and research. In fact, I'll even take it a step farther as we got to the branded part, that when I trademarked it, I took after the footsteps of my mom, who ended up doing shading hair as living art, as in Shiloh. And I said, I'm going to do this with this. I don't know if I'm spending money down the road where I'm going to be, whether it'll be worthwhile, but I ended up trademarking it under 3 categories, obviously radio, writing, and public speaking. And so far it seems to be good. It's obviously a work in progress, but it's a show that when you think about the reality of the whole thing, that it's come of age.
Absolutely. And I can still remember that, how excited you were back there on that Wheels show. I'm glad you brought that up because I remember that. That was a exciting part for you as well, because you'd been working with me in the Detroit Monitor and also in the Sports Exchange doing a show here and there. But I remember when you got that opportunity down there in Arizona, and that fits you to a T. It really does, And it's a great moniker for you, and it tells a lot of story and a lot of history about everything that you've done, Scott, and that we've done too together.
Well, I think what was interesting about that situation was what I really liked about Weeklywheels in Arizona, Phoenix, is I had an opportunity to do an auto racing show. Up until that point, I had never done a show that mainly focused on another sport, let alone a sport like auto racing. So it challenged me outside of my comfort zone to do it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I got used to it. And then, of course, I began to incorporate other sports in my calls. They didn't mind it because they knew that it led to an opportunity to talk to Ernie Harwell and some other bigger name guests. But the focus was on auto racing. We did a lot of stuff over at Phoenix International Raceway. And that's when the name began to turn out to be what it was. Now, let me go over a few other things that, since it's become a permanent part of my personality, the intent for one-on-one interviews originally started with no limits. That was the original idea. But you know what? The show changed. No limits, obviously. Mark Littell, the late pitcher for the Kansas City Royals, St. Louis Cardinals, gave me the idea. What we were going to do is use that as my one-on-one format. But in recent months, I've begun to incorporate maybe 2 or 3 people on that show. So therefore, now you have not the one-on-one, but maybe 2-on-1 or 3 people on a panel talking about non-sports related ideas, because as you know, we have a lot of different shows for all the different things that we do. And I wanted something that was going to be totally, you could go any way you want. So as No Limits began to change into something else, the idea of creating the Motor City Madmouth show became a no-brainer at that point.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was. And you've done a lot with No Limits. I know it's been a good program here on the platform. But you're right. This is going to be a new, exciting program right here, Motor City Madmouth, and it's great that you're debuting it. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I think the thing that I've really enjoyed about No Limits a lot, though, is it's given me the opportunity to hone on that one-on-one passion that I've always had. Now, let me talk about recent history with the Motor City Madmouth show without mentioning any names. This was supposed to be aired on another network in conjunction with self-publishing the book. Unfortunately, none of those plans came to fruition, and I had to change directions. And as a result, this is why it's on my platform here. And it's obviously fate has it that it probably should have wound up here anyways. But when you're trying to do business with somebody, things change in their lives, and things that are supposed to take place just subsequently don't work out for whatever reason. But what's interesting about it was I brought on a person here. I mentioned her name once or twice, and I'll bring her on a game, named Melissa G. Wilson. She's going to be a future guest here on the Motor City Madmouth show. And she's the one who's helping me with the book, obviously, Lessons from the Microphone. And as a result, with her presence there, we've able to stabilize the ship a little bit and to make sure that it's on track to do what it needs to do. But so let me give everybody an overview of what this show is really going to do. It's going to be a one-on-one platform is what it's going to be. A lot of people that I know around the country, as well as some of the people that I've known that I've worked with on a regular basis. So it rewards the loyal and brings out the other individuals around the country. So it's pretty much I can interview anybody, but the one policy that I have is I won't turn it into a political or religious type of broadcast. I'm not into that. There's enough good content out there that I don't have to do that whatsoever. So anybody's in, as far as I'm concerned, if you have a good subject matter, the shows don't have to go 60 minutes. They may be 30, 35, 40 minutes at the very most. I have to be conscious of attention span. But the one thing I won't do is while attention spans may be limited to a certain amount, I don't shortchange any show because it's not necessary to do that. You want to make sure you get it right the first time and that no stones or facts are left unturned. But it's open to anybody. So if anybody out there wants to come on the Motor City Madmouth show, then feel free to participate in the chat room or send your ideas to southfloridatribune@gmail.com, and then we'll be able to do it. I should point out that we do broadcast the Motor City Madmouth show live on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube as well. And it will be on our website, www.southfloridatribune.com, as well as Twitter @Tribune South. So you can find it a few other places. We'll work on the audio portion as the show continues to develop. So, but it's a show that's come of age. Anything you want to add to this?
Oh, no, I just think it's a great platform here. Obviously, you've done a great job, and, behind the scenes, Candy and all her tough, hard work. And you've created an avenue for so many, and you're always looking to better yourself. And that's one thing about you, Scott, that I've always admired among many traits of yours, but that you're always looking to get better, to do something different, to make something stand out and make something grab people's attention. And I think that's exactly what you're going to do with this show. And I've told you before, and I'm not trying to just kiss up, but I have told you, you are one hard-nosed journalist. You've always been, and you're a great interviewer. So, I mean, those two things going together, I mean, people are craving for that. We got so many other things that are out there, and a lot of stuff is fluff. But you have never been afraid, me either, of tackling serious subjects and serious things that have to be discussed. And there are serious parts of sports or the entertainment or the news business that we've had to cover. But yeah, no, I think it's the perfect platform and perfect show to do that.
Well, when Tom Gage once mentioned to me that he said I was industrious and that was a compliment, I think, well, I appreciate that. I mean, I don't know if I handle compliments all that well because to me, it's an expectation. I treat broadcasting like Barry Sanders treats running the football when you get in the end zone. You've done one, you move on to the next because you don't stay in this business without thinking you know what you're doing. But, when people do reach out and then they say nice things, and I'll certainly thank their hand. I appreciate the kind words. I'm looking to do better the next time. Where do I do better? Where do I get that one from? Well, Tony Kornheiser and Michael Wilbon. The best show that ESPN does have going for it is, pardon the interruption, with two old school journalists. Now, I didn't mention this in my book, but I don't mind mentioning it here. I'll never forget the time when you and I covered a Toledo Mud Hens game. I'm not going to mention the executive at hand, because I really don't think a name is pertinent to what we're talking about. But I was asking him so many different questions, and he says to both of us, Scott, you're looking for a story that isn't here. And you know what?
Yeah.
God bless the guy. You can't blame me for trying, but the one thing about the guy at the Mud Hens is he was polite and he was very nice about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. You're looking for a story that isn't here. Yeah.
Let's face it. Line. As writers and broadcasters, I'm not afraid to hear it the other way either. I'm not one of those patty cake bakers, man, kind of people where I got to be nice and nobody's going to, give you a hard time. It does happen. Once upon a time, and it is listed in my book, George Steinbrenner treated me like tedkoppel. If you ask him the manager's story, he's going to carve you a new backside. But I would respect Mr. Steinbrenner for that, because he treated me like tedkoppel. Don't ask him the manager's question. He's going to talk about his championships and make it look bad. Only tedkoppel looked worse on an ABC News Nightline. And George abruptly ended my interview after I got a lot of information about his farm system. Stroke him for his farm system. He'll talk all day long. If you start talking about the managers, then he knows he's had enough. But again, these are the types of people that when you bring them up. Now, one of my people that I really enjoyed interviewing over the years when I was growing up in the business was a guy by the name of ojsimpson. Folks, I don't care what you say about ojsimpson now and all the murder things that he's done. But when you're a young fledgling journalist like I am, okay, and you've approached Howard Cosell and he says no in a very egotistical, arrogant manner, and said, okay, Mr. Cosell, no problem. Then I go up to ojsimpson and I ask him, what do you think I did? Asked the same different question 5 different times. And by the end of the interview, his compliment, you did a good job for being a young guy. He was very nice. ojsimpson. Again, I'm not talking about what he's done now. I'm talking about what he did for a young journalist who gave me a lot of confidence.
Absolutely. He was an athlete. He was a great athlete. We all know that before things went south. But no. I mean, you cannot be stymied, and Howard Cosell liked to do that. When he didn't want something or didn't want to agree or come on your show or whatever, he would try to stymie you. But no, you moved on. And obviously that was a great benefit to you as well. And, like I said, Simpson had a hell of a career. So I'm not talking about his other stuff, but boy, he was one of the greatest of all time as far as college football and the NFL goes. So we all know that. But no, you cannot let some people do that to you or me in this business. We just cannot allow that. We got to move on and we got to get the story out there. If one person won't cooperate, we'll go to someone else.
Right. Now, in my book, Lessons from the Microphone, I do have a section in there called Top 100 Interviews. And you know what? Even top 100 isn't enough, but you have to draw the line somewhere. So there'll be certain names that were left out, some that aren't. But I'll tell you what, I'll take my lineup of people that I've spoken with over the years and be very proud that I was able to even be in the same company with that. With that said, when you talk about a show and a hat, I got to go right down the road to Boca Raton, Florida, where FAU football coach Tom Herman marvels at the name, and he's made it known at a couple of times. And I saw him play against Monmouth when FAU won the first time, and then hammered my alma mater. And it's been so great because Coach Tom Herman, a lot of people know, is obviously coached at Ohio State and Texas and all that. But when you get to know Coach Herman himself, one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. His intellect is like no other coach I've ever dealt with, and I've dealt with a lot of them. So he talks about the hat, and now all of a sudden you've got the AD Brian White looking at, because what Brian told me when we were out in Tampa covering the event, FAU against USF, he stays in the background watching, sees a rapport going on with the media and his coach. And he said, I really like the rapport you have with Coach Herman. My gosh, I mean, it's unreal. So, but the one thing I was able to learn from that entire experience with those two is this, okay? And I've noticed it recently. You could go to sporting events, obviously know you're not allowed to cheer and do anything like that, and you want to be as professional. I've never seen anybody frown upon you for wearing a hat. And all of a sudden, luckily, the people I work with have been really good about it too. Cameron Gorby of obviously mine, say nothing me. He's one of the nicest guys I've ever seen in my life. In the short time I've gotten to work with him, Katrina McCormick, you know her. She's been around forever. But, the thing is they see your marketing and your branding. They don't care. Just act in a professional way. Do what you got to do. After all, we're here to grow them, and they're helping us to grow ours.
Absolutely.
But when you think about Tom Herman, what I did when I was at, in Tampa was, I'll tell you what, Katrina, give me a photo with Herman and I'll get him a hat. So she said, you can ask him. No problem. I mean, Katrina, you've met her. She's one of the nicest people I've ever met.
Yep.
And Coach, make a deal with you. Take a picture with me and I'll get you a hat. No problem. Couldn't get over to the other back of the room fast enough to take this thing. So when now Candy's in the process of going ahead and getting him a hat. But the reason why I mentioned in this story is this: if you're a young journalist, don't be afraid to brand yourself. If you find the right individual, you can wear certain shirts like company shirts, hats, and whatnot, and not have to feel very bad about it because nobody's going to look down upon you. What people don't want to see are the raggedy jeans and the shirts that look like you don't belong in that environment. But if you're wearing a golf shirt, hat, nobody's going to care.
But and you're absolutely right, Scott. I mean, nowadays, a lot of the companies, a lot of the news stations, of course, all of them have nice polos with their insignia on, whether it's a Circle 7 for WXYZ here in Detroit, or whether it's a News for Detroit or, News Tampa, or wherever it is. They all have nice shirts and do that. And I've got a few of my own for different associations I belong to, too, like the National Polish Sports American Hall of Fame and the Detroit Sports Media Association. I mean, and everybody's kind of got that thing going right now, but it's good. But the hat, now that's really unique, and that's really, I think, very clever on your end. Yeah, to do that with the hat and wear that, like you said, out there when you're working.
Well, I had an interesting situation. I'm over at a chamber event today. We do the virtual thing on Wednesdays. They're the first and third. So I was kidding around with Andrea Jacobs, who's actually in charge of our group, and her husband Matt will be coming on my show, and he's a good friend of the show. And I was kidding. I just bought a Detroit hat with 313 and Detroit on it. So I was just kidding around with her before we ended up starting the meeting. She said, I should wear this one or the other one. No, I think you stick one of the ones you're branding with. And Andrea's just great. One of the nice people I've ever met. I was going to do it anyways. I was just looking to gauge her reaction, what it was. And, this is a cap that I sported today, as I do everywhere else. The one person who's really happy about these hats is my wife, Candy. Because now that I got all these Motor City Madmouth hats, it saves us from going to the truck stop and having to buy other hats instead of adding the price of only wearing my house. She's loving every second of that. Hey, if it took maybe 10, 15 South Florida Tribune, Motor City Madmouth hats for you to go out there and stay away from the truck stops, and more power to you. It's a great investment. So, but Tom Herman's great. And I think that, when I do ultimately get him the hat, I don't know whether I'll end up going out there and getting it to him at his weekly show or whatever. I'm going to get it to him, said, here you go, coach. So we're working on that. But it's just neat how you have a college coach with a personality that can embrace branding the way this guy does. And whether he stays at FAU 1 year or 2 years, depending on how quickly he turns around, if he gets another big job, to me, just to have the opportunity to work with Tom Herman, to me, has been nothing short of unbelievable. And now the same holds true with FAU AD Brian White, because as I alluded to, that he really does go out there and enjoy the idea of me having that kind of relationship with his head coach.
Sure. And it's all good. It's important to build relationships like that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, Brian White will come on the Motor City Madmouth show. He doesn't know it yet, but he did give me his cell phone number when I tell him I launched the show. He's already given me come on anytime you want me to, but he's going to come on this show. We ain't bring him nowhere else. Not like he doesn't know the story behind this whole thing. Anyways, so let me go over the premise of how important one-on-one interviews are to me. What was your favorite interview show? I know you probably watch a lot of shows in the media. Are there any ones that stand out to you?
Well, when I was growing up, I mean, the two that I really watched a lot were the Meet the Press, which was on NBC. And I don't know, every station had their own. Okay, this week with David Brinkley, and then there was Face the Nation on CBS, which is a good show. But I really like that Meet the Press. And then the other one was when they had those specials with Barbara Walters. I've always admired Barbara Walters for her interview techniques. She was a fine journalist. You know, Scott, you got her start on the Today Show on NBC, which was a great program, and then made the jump over to ABC. But I always liked that. And of course, Tedkoppel. I mean, what a brilliant pro. Ted had that show late at night at 11:30, as we know, on ABC, and Koppel was just another one that I really admired growing up. So I'd say I can't choose between those three, but those were the three, that I really, really wanted to see and watch.
The one that stands out to me has always been Up Close with Roy Firestone.
Oh yeah, yep.
Now, Roy happens to be a Facebook friend. I don't know if we've ever had much interaction on Facebook. Don't care. I like to watch his posts because I'm intrigued by what he does. But I watched him a lot on ESPN. And it's a shame, too, because ESPN had so many great programs going on. I'm not going to talk about ESPN's problems and nothing to do with it. But when Roy Firestone had Up Close on there to me, I have always looked at him as a role model to me that I could just try to dig in deep, get to know the individual, and try to follow his way of doing things. Chris Myers followed him and didn't do a bad job either. But Roy Firestone, to me, if you can find me a better interviewer than Roy Firestone, go ahead and do it, because I don't know if there is one.
Yeah, no, and I'm not trying to say that I never watched him. Of course, I watched him. Dickschaap was another guy that did a lot of good interviews. I remember when Dickschaap was on and doing a lot of shows. But Roy, Roy's right at the top, man. He's awesome. I mean, he always has been, and asking the important questions and a lot of the questions that some people wouldn't even ask. That's a sign of a good interviewer.
Yeah, you mentioned a great one. I love Dickschaap too. I think another one of my favorite shows on ESPN was the Sports Reporters. It was a shame that one went away.
Oh
But
yeah.
Dickschaap, John Saunders.
Yeah, Mitch Albom from Detroit. I mean, they've had some great people on that show. Yeah, fantastic. The Sports Reporters was a good deal. Wasn't Bob Ryan too? He was a good
No,
guy.
Bob Ryan.
Ryan.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness, are you kidding? I know
yeah,
Bob real well from my association with NSMA, and I'm hoping to catch up with him if I'm feeling well next
yeah. Another
June.
great guy, great interviewer, and great journalist, Bob Ryan. Wow. Oh,
Oh,
terrific.
Bob Ryan, he's classic. He's just class. He
Yeah,
really is. I mean, when you
yeah,
talk about a guy, I did an interview with him outside of a book signing, which I'm hoping that when I talk to Dave Gore, and I have one coming up, that if he doesn't, Dave is always good. I'll tell him I got a book come up, I need a spot, and I feel quite confident we'll be able to do it. Not well, I'll deal with it, but I'll cross that bridge when I come in June. But no, I'll tell you what though, Dickschaap, the Sports Reporters. I mean,
yeah,
you can always learn from a lot of what we're doing. And I think that's one of the things I enjoyed about my book here is the fact that you can learn from a lot of different people, regardless whether they're in the news and sports industry. And I think that's the most important thing I'm trying to get out to a lot of people. Now, again, mind you, I'm not going to pretend that with lessons from the microphone, I know everything, because I'm not going to tell you that at all. I don't. It's a work in progress. It's an old school versus new school type of book. But the whole idea is you can garner ideas anywhere, whether you meet the person directly or interact. So just in case you're joining us, folks, this is the new era begins, a Motor City Madmouth show. My name is Scott Morganroth, Motor City Madmouth. Please be joined by George Eichorn, the guy who I've gotten the business back in 1979, and now 44 years later, we're still at it strong. We do a lot of stuff for the South Florida Tribune Broadcasting Network. And if you want to talk about two people that are inseparable, George and I are probably as much as you're going to get with that.
Yeah, we sure are. We've seen a lot together, done a lot, covered a lot of great events together, and of course, done a lot solo on our own as well. So it's great to be with you tonight, Scott.
Well, had to start with somebody. Couldn't think of anybody else better to do it. But the main thing is this, an interview to me, I've always viewed the media. I don't know how is if you can connect to one person, get somebody to learn, you've done your job. If you get more
Yeah,
than that, you're even better.
absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? In today's industry, it's not always easy to get that job, get it done properly. The reason being is things have changed. Like you said, new media versus old media, where coaches would be able to sit down in a corner and you still get some of these, which is great. And I mean, but a lot of that stuff is so controlled now. They only want them to talk from a lectern stand. They only want you to ask one question or,
Right.
all these limits that are on there now. But I always, like I said, I always admired about you. is you were able to carve out that time with the individual you're speaking with, the coach, the athlete, the player, broadcaster, whoever it is. And, and those things are they're not as common as they used to be, but they're very important to get those kind of interviews. No question about it.
I think what's really important too, you really made a lot of good points, but the main thing is this. Unlike a lot of the youngsters getting in it today, you and I can say we've been there, done that. If we don't do a whole lot tomorrow, you just pick and choose where you want to go, meaning that we can go out on our own terms. We really, really can.
Yep.
Unfortunately, a lot of these youngsters aspiring to get in. But remember, when we were back in the day with the old school, we only had radio, TV, and maybe written material, and that's it. Now, everybody that wants to get behind a microphone can do it, and that's fine. Everybody has their own style. No, not criticizing or knocking anybody's style. I don't care. I mean, you got to do what you have to do. And I believe it in my book, I talk about shadowing and how you draw from other individuals. Absolutely. But I feel like, how many times have we brought some of our old friends out? I'm glad we got out of it this time. It's just not the same.
Right. Oh, yeah, for sure. And you're absolutely right. I mean, today's standard is different, but hey, you can't just expect somebody to listen or watch you unless you've carved out some stuff that you've done, unless they know that you've been a good interviewer, or they recall that interview you had with Don Mattingly, or that interview that I had with Scotty Bowman when he was here, or whatever. I mean, you journalism is important, and I know opinions are important. There's such a high emphasis on opinions on shows and podcasts nowadays, but it's also very, very critical and vital for you to get the story first person, the athlete, coach, the manager, the broadcaster. And that's what you and I have been trying to stress and been good at, I feel, over the years.
I think the one key that's important when anybody gets in our industry is you can't go in there with video and audio only. You've got to be a good writer to even have a prayer or even a chance to get in events, because you know what? Communications, PR people, they get hounded with requests and they have to choose to make a judgment call if that individual is qualified to be able to walk through there instead of being a fan in there. And there's certain lines you have to draw. I don't credential just anybody to go to events. And in fact, most of the cases, I've only credentialed maybe one person outside of myself and you, and that would be David Voltz, who I've known with the Deerfield Beach Observer forever, and he covers FAU stuff, and I trust the guy. But you don't want any PR guy to come down on you. So who did you send out here to me? You don't want to do that, because then you look bad after a while. And I'm not knocking any individuals, but in order to be a credible part of the media, you have to be able to understand the written word to be able to talk about it. And the formula that we've gone out there and utilized here is making sure that we write the story, insert the video in it, so that way you give it a complete package. But again, I don't want to drag this first episode any longer than I have to, but I want to make sure I give everybody an overview of what we're talking about. That again, the Motor City Madmouth show is going to be strictly one-on-one interviews. The frequency of the shows will depend on the types of guests. If it's strong enough to go every week, we will. If we go twice a month, we'll do that, and we'll begin to narrow down the days that we'll do it. Most likely it'll probably be on Wednesday night. I like the Wednesday because it's hump day anyways. So right now I just want to get it out there in advance so you know that a new show here and the South Florida Tribune is now live. And I'm just glad that my whole dream of not only writing this book has become a reality, but to have this show as well. And I hope that you enjoy the interviews I'm going to conduct, because in my opinion, everybody is a story out there. They really, really are. It's just being able to dig in there, find out what they're able to bring to the table. And I've always been a firm believer that anything we do, we have to educate, entertain, and inform. And I've always been a firm believer of that, and I'll never back away from that. So,
absolutely. Yep.
But the Motor City Madmouth show is here, and I look forward to all the different people that you're going to see along the lines as we go forward. Tonight, the Sports Exchange, George and I will flip on over there. JB Ellis and Jacob Christner will be the crew tonight. We'll talk about the latest events in the sports world. But to me, this is something I'm very proud of. And I do want to mention, once again, if it weren't for my late ex-wife, Susanpetrik, God rest in peace, Susan, I wouldn't have this name, because I never, when I get a new name, sometimes I don't know if somebody's demeaning me or complimenting me. But then I understand that when Susan gave it to me, she said, no, this is you, Scott. It really is. I see the way your hand movement, your animated, your voice inflections are what they are. You are good at this. And then she put me in the same sentence as Ted Nugent. Then it made me a believer that maybe there's something here.
Yeah.
Now, move the clock up a little bit. My wife, Candy, calls me a crazy man because she does it mainly because I'm on the road and I drive late in the night and I get stronger. But then I gravitate to that because crazy man to me is a sign of endurance. Doesn't have to be bad. It could be a sign of endurance.
Yeah.
But if there's ever a person that I believe that this show is meant for, the Motor City Madmouth, thank you, Susan. And thanks, Candy, for supporting the person that was here before you and knowing that we're trying to brand something that we believe will be really, really special. And all my family that understands that this is a name, and particularly my mom who taught me how to brand something and patent and trademark it if you feel there's some substance to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm proud of you, Scott, and I'm happy we're finally launching, and it's great to be on. It's been a fun time being on with you tonight. Yeah.
All right. Well, you know what, folks? I don't know what else there is to say, except thank you very much for joining on this first episode of the Motor City Madmouth Show. A new era begins. And stay tuned for updates as we will have them to you, about future guests. I know that right now I have a lot of people in mind, but we'll just see how it all plays out. But you know what? Again, let me just mention a couple things before we sign off. Lessons from the Microphone is a book that I'm just about ready to launch. It's tuning into the enduring wisdom of visionary leaders. And it's a book where I talk about old school media, how you can learn from people that you met and you haven't met. And it's important to have colleagues as well as shadow people from a distance or close. And some of your role models can even become coaches, family members, or whatnot. But as long as you're able to learn, you do what you've got to do. And I try to base a lot of those premises. And you're going to see some of those concepts here on the Motor City Madmouth in an indirect sense, where STP, which is the motor oil, I call it slow down, think, and proceed. Okay. And that's what helped me get through college. Another thing that I learned when I was in college was, to me, the chess theory, which Harold Kowal helped me, where you want to play chess where you have one move at a time and be able to think 3 steps ahead, which coincides with Larry Bird. A lot of these theories that are interview theories are going to be utilized in the interviews that I'm going to be dealing out with. And hopefully that as you listen to the show time and time again, that I can teach you anything about interviewing or trying to take a 20 to 30 minute opportunity to get into somebody. That's what it's all about. So between something that Larry Bird taught me, thinking 3 steps ahead, the chess theory, the STP, it all comes down to good interview skills. And if you have good interview skills and you make your people very, very comfortable, that's really what it's all about. So again, a new era begins. George, thank you very much for being on here.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad to be here.
And we will see you shortly. So once again, the Motor City Madmouth Show is here, and look forward to catching you the next time. Good night, everybody.